Well, here we go again. Another month has already passed. When you do these things once a month, when I wind my striker clock once a week, when I write an article once a month, it really keeps up as time passes. And weeks pass now, and about 2, at the most 3 days. Time really flies. This month, I talked to you about some throat issues that I've been having with some glands in my throat. Makes me hoarse sometimes, so I really made a scene. West Virginia beekeepers, I apologize to any West Virginia beekeepers who were at that meeting and might be watching now. I mean, I coughed and talked, coughed and talked, coughed and talked. I did the best I could, but I just didn't have my voice. People graciously took up throat lozenges for me and gave me water and propped me up and kept me going. So it wasn't lost on my trip to Kalamazoo that I did a few weeks later to that beekeeping group there. At least I knew it was going to happen, and I tried to prepare for it. So I was talking to my doc. This thing affected my life. I need to get this cough under control. He gave me a prescription for medication. Take this when you feel a cough coming on. Probably some kind of virus. We don't know. Sweat it out. His dad had been a beekeeper years ago over in Maryland. And he suddenly just blurted out, "Why don't you take honey? Good time to use that." Actually, I've been doing it already. To take a teaspoon occasionally when the cough really comes on. And what I found out in a hurry, now it's just me, may not be you, but if you just dip a teaspoon of honey out of a jar and suck that stuff down, it's kind of overwhelming just for a couple of minutes there. Sure, it soothes your throat because I've forgotten about it for just a minute. Now, for all you people I'm offending, I don't mean to do that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to do that. People are different. People react to taking honey in different ways. So I don't mean to say that mine is the end-all way. But what I did figure out, for me, worked well. Take the other end of the spoon, the handle end, and just dip it 3/8, half an inch in the honey. Suck that stuff off, feel a cough coming on, drink. Working on my computer, feel a cough coming on. Do that. And that helped now. That soothed my throat as well as any cough drop. I think it worked as well as the medication that he gave me. I was all over the literature. How to take honey, how to take honey. Honey is a medicinal product. And I found about 1 million hits, and it's all over the page. So what I didn't know is, well, that honey over here in these 5-gallon cans I've got, or some bottled up over here you can't see, is that the same as melaleuca? Does that have the same medicinal qualities as some people think buckwheat has? So what I asked myself in the article, does that honey in my hand with the spoon right now help this cough? So what I think I learned was just generally writing about the uses of honey in medicine, specifically in my case, a cough, and then actually having a cough, going to the web, looking something up, were not the same searches. I wanted honey right now, right here, with the spoon to help this cough. I was not making plans for some future thing that might happen. So I can tell you this, it surely didn't hurt. It probably helped. It was easy to take, and it tasted better than anything else that I was taking, cough syrups and lozenges and whatever. So yeah, it kept me busy, and I think it probably helped some. I don't know how much. Now, I probably just offended half the honey consuming people for medicinal values in the country. I don't mean to. I was trying to get this cough under control right here, right now. And honey seemed to help. Not a miracle drug cure, but it did soften the moment until I could limp through and let my old aging body actually do the recovery work. Good tasting honey. Secondly, I talked about a trip that I took to Paris last year. We know from previous surveys that you're not really wild about travel log trips that others took. So I tried to keep it short, and I wrote about it because to me this was a unique trip. Of all my travels that I've done professionally and all my travels that my wife and I have done because we like to travel, this was one of its kind. I went to a manufacturing plant facility just outside of Paris in Chilhac, France, to visit the Apivar manufacturing facility. They gave me a walkthrough. We tried to video it. We wanted to do it live, and we did do it live. We captured it, but there were some technical glitches. We expected that. We just didn't know where they were going to be. And as we worked through the video production, we certainly found out where they were. It's posted on the web, and you can have a look at it. I had a nice visit. The place was immaculately clean. The warehouse, everything was clean. There were backups and redundancies for everything. So if they tested something for a particular value at that position in manufacturing, somewhere along the way, that particular aspect was retested. What they told me time and again that their goal was in manufacturing Apivar was that it be exactly what that label tells you is in that package. It seemed to me that they were doing as best a job that they could do. The staff was young and energetic and intelligent and eager. I felt kind of like an old dog around a bunch of puppies. These people had energy now. They were committed to manufacturing this product for beekeeping. I had a great time. I learned far more than I could ever do for them there. And I appreciate the product. Is this a commercial? No. No, I don't mean for it to be. I use Apivar. But in the past, I've used Checkmate and the other products that have all come and gone. Right now, I'm using Apivar and oxalic acid fumigated. That's not a commercial. That's not a recommendation. That's just what I'm doing to survive mites. I don't eradicate anything, as you know, and it's something that I have to do all along to keep my bees as healthy as I can. I enjoyed the trip a lot. I learned a lot. I'd never seen the actual nuts and bolts of taking raw product, ingredients and chemicals and turning it into the finished product that I dip inside a beehive. It helped me see what all goes on to make that product so easy to use and so readily available. So if you have an inclination, if you use chemical controls, there it is. But is this a recommendation? No, it's not. My wife and I stayed longer. I mean, who goes to Paris and stays a couple of days and takes a technical tour? So we did all well, we can't do all. It's a magnificent city. We did what we could do. We hadn't been there since we were about 22 years old, 50 years ago. Last year was my wife and my 50th wedding anniversary, so we call that our anniversary trip. But this time, I was neck deep in bees. The last time, I had not yet taken the bee bug. Speaking of bee bug, there's that raspy throat. We went to a place, Luxembourg Gardens. They've had a bee yard there, an apiary, landscaped, tasteful, beautifully done since 1856. I don't know of any bee yard in the U.S. that's been in the same place for that long. Of course, the hives, the design were antique, it's probably reproductions, but I understand they had some of the original antique somewhere else. I didn't go to that. Nicely laid out, kind of a wrought iron, wired steel something looking fence around it. It had an original sculpture inside a watering pool there. It had a pavilion. It really looked nice. I could never do anything in my bee yard right behind the camera, right behind that wall, across the backyard, behind the fence. I could never do anything like that in my yard. I can cut the grass and keep things cleaned up some, but it'll never look like that yard. And what I felt there was an appreciation for the long-term commitment that people with my and your interest have made all down through the years. So it rejuvenated me, it inspired me, it intrigued me to visit, look around there. ironically, as we stood on the sign in French that said, "Don't stand by the fence, stings are likely." And as we stood by the fence, not being able to read French, bees stung us a couple of times. But we're tourists. That's what tourists do. I had a great time there. We also visited rooftop bees. I've visited rooftop bees in this country, but they take them a click or two higher, seemingly. Because all throughout Paris, rooftop bees are fairly common. I mean, most people know that bees are kept on roofs. I say most people, like I've spent half my life there. The people I was around, which primarily were beekeepers, said that it was common. And the public seemed to tolerate it. So off we did go, I don't know, 7 or 8, 10 floors up to visit rooftop bees. You can look all across the Paris countryside and see the various monuments, towers there. It was really an interesting sight, and there were bees. So how much better can a trip be? You're there, you're looking at all these historic sites, and you got bees right there in front of you. So it seems to me, perfect trip. I had a lot of wonderments. I had the wonderments in Denver and in Cleveland and a few other places I've been to rooftop bees. How high can bees go? Years ago, I didn't mean to tell you this, but I talked to a guy who works on these communication towers. And one time he's come across a bee nest that high off the ground. What are those things, 100 feet? So bees must have a height limitation, but I don't know what it is. They were certainly coming and going that day. The hives were kept fairly small. Frames, individual frames, seemed to be removed. Kind of hard to ask and talk with translations and broken languages, but it wasn't exactly the kind of beekeeping I'm doing, where I'm trying to do 2, 3 deeps, 2, 3 supers. These colonies were generally kept smaller. So I really appreciated the fact. And in fact, some of the buildings are constructed or renovated with bees in mind. And they actually have little bee niches or bee rooms or something specifically to house bees in that building. And I was struck by the very fact that here in Ohio, in old houses, those old Victorian farmhouses, way up in the attic, it's not impossible to find what is called a bee room. And I've wondered how that worked. Did people go scurrying up the stairs just in the morning before breakfast and rip into that box? It was, and the 2 that I visited, it was just a box with bees in it, cross comb, whatever. Break out a piece of honeycomb, back downstairs you do go. I don't know how it worked. We don't do that anymore. For this article, I was going to go into why don't we keep bees in small buildings anymore, large buildings. We do, commercially, keep bees indoors for wintering in some of the western states in Canada. But I'm talking about the old books that show small houses. You can go right down here and buy all these little barns, gable barns that are delivered and you use to store garden tools or a small tractor or whatever. I did that. I bought one, and I intended fully to put bees in it. And what I put in that building was actually a really nice load of junk. Some parts to the tractor and some lumber and cement I'll never use. So I never got around to putting the bees in. But why didn't I get around to it? I mean, I'm close to neighbors. I've written about them time and again. But I really ran out of space, having only about 200 words left in my allocated monthly article space. I thought, shouldn't start this now, start this some other time. But I am going to be asking you, do you know anyone who keeps bees inside? I've actually visited a couple of people who had bees in the wall of their garage. Strange things happen. You don't have to have an outer cover, you just have to have an inner cover. And the bees don't drift and rob so badly because they're outside. All these things are not in the article. All these things were not discussed. But I'm just giving you a heads up that that was intriguing. And it kind of came from seeing bees in this day and age with the paranoia that so many people have and a litigious system that can sometimes bring on court actions for bees in places that other people don't like. I just wondered why in these novel yards we've not reconsidered keeping bees inside small buildings again. So I pursued and thought about that. Thank you for giving me a chance to fine-tune some of the comments that I made on the article that I wrote over here on the other side of the room. Deeply appreciate it, and until next month, I'm Jim, telling you bye. Till then.